Their names were Mart and Allison, and they came to visit us on occasion when I was a boy, and once or twice we went to visit them. They were school teachers and lived together on the top floor of an old brick house. Mart was tall and thin and wore her dark hair in a bun. Allison was shorter and red-haired and was the kind of woman once called handsome. Her full name was Allison Douglas, which translated in my 5-year-old mind as Alice and Douglas. But my mother referred to them as Mart and Allison, which sounded to me like Martin Allison. It was all so confusing, but oddly appropriate. Their names linked as though they were one person, half female, half male, which strikes me even today as not incorrect. Most of my mother's girlfriends were of the same physical mold. They were either thin and wiry or square and muscular, and all of them were unmarried, but for one who had several children and a mustache. Most were gym teachers, and my mother would describe them as outdoorsy. They first met when she worked as a secretary for the Girl Scouts. They were leaders and administrators, and they were all very fond of her. Whenever they visited, she welcomed them with a kindness shadowed by a certain reluctance I never completely understood. I liked them. They were fun to be around, and they were comfortable in their bodies in ways that other women weren't. They were independent, and they seemed happy. My mother and her girlfriends spent the summers of the 1930s at a Girl Scout camp near their hometown. All were camp counselors, and they bonded, I imagine, sitting around a campfire late at night after their young charges were in bed, talking of the girls and their teenage problems, and celebrating their own love of being in the great outdoors, away from civilization and the tyranny of men. My mother's boss, a woman named Billy, introduced my mother to my father, and my mother always spoke of Billy with great affection, still remembering the sorrow she suffered when Billy moved to another city and another Girl Scout office. She and Billy exchanged Christmas cards every year, and when I was grown, I arranged for my mother and Billy to reconnect. I met Billy for the first time then. She was square and muscular and very outdoorsy. My mother was happy to see her, but the meeting was a little awkward. They didn't have a lot to say to each other, and they never saw one another again. Our next-door neighbor, Georgetta, once referred to one of my mother's girlfriends as a lesbian. Mother was incensed. It was as if Georgetta had accused the woman, in the paranoia of the 1950s, of being a Russian spy. Of course, in the spirit of that metaphor, all of my mother's girlfriends spoke with thick Russian accents. Still, my mother refused to recognize their foreign allegiance. Her Catholicism and the tenor of the times denied these women approval, but when her closest friend, a solid woman named Marion, who had a contagious laugh and eyes that squinted with warmth, when Marion moved in with another woman, my mother refused to judge her. She prayed for her, I'm certain, but she always welcomed Marion gladly when her friend came to visit. The happiest 6 months of my mother's life was when she served as a substitute girls' gym teacher at my high school. The girls confided in her, and they loved her. Years later, when my wife and I celebrated our 10th anniversary with a party and a dance, my mother spent the evening cutting a rug with a lesbian friend of ours. "Your mother's a terrific dancer," our friend told us later. "She would have made a great lesbian."